Alright, so let's move back to our project and see how React batches state updates in practice and how this state updating is in fact asynchronous. So let's come down here to our tab content component and then let's play around a little bit with the states that we have here. And first of all, I want to now implement the functionality of this undo button here. So this undo will basically undo or reset the two states that we have here. So this one and this one. So let's write a simple function handle undo. And then what it does is set show details back to true and set the likes back to 0. And then let's use that handler right here. So easy enough, handle undo, and yeah, that works great. So as we just learned in the previous lecture, inside of this event handler function here, these two state updates are batched. So they will only cause one component re-render. Now, how can we actually prove that? Well, one simple way is to log something to the console here. So let's say render, and so then each time that the component gets re-rendered, and so then each time this console.log will log render to the console. So let's see. Let's first get rid of these other ones that we had here. So here they are, and okay. Now never mind this one here that is a bit more grayed out. This is coming from somewhere else. So only this one render here is important. So this first render string here comes from the initial render of this tab content component. And if we go to another tab, then we get another one, because of course, then this component here is updated. Okay, now let's remove this so that we start empty. Or actually, we will see a few more. So each time that we click here, the component function gets rendered, and so then the console.log is executed. And so this is actually a really nice way of proving that rendering is calling the component function. All right, but now let's empty this. And then as I click this button here, we should only see one render here, which would then mean that these two state updates were batched. So let's see, and indeed, we only get one here. Great. Now let's also see that the state updating is asynchronous. So basically, if I try to access the number of likes here right after updating the state, then what happens? So first I need to, of course, increase a little bit. Then let's clean this. And as I reset, well, we get 5, which might be surprising, but if you paid good attention in the previous lecture, then this will actually no longer come as a surprise to you. So the reason that here we get 5 is that the state is in fact actually only updated after the re-rendering, or basically during the re-rendering, but not immediately after we call this function. So that's impossible, and therefore here we still get that old likes state, which again is still at 5. Then now it is of course at 0, because now the re-rendering has already happened. Now, by the way, what do you think will happen? So what do you think will get rendered if we click the undo button again? So let's clear this, and so let's see what happens. So I click this now, and you see that no render was logged to the console. So why do you think that is? Why was the component instance not re-rendered this time? Well, it's because both of the state values were already at their default, basically. So details was already true and likes was already 0. And so then, as we attempted to update the state, both of them were actually not updated. And again, that's because the new state was equal to the current state. And so in that situation, React will not even try to attempt to update the state. And then, of course, it will also not re-render the component instance. And so that's why, well, nothing happens. So as we keep clicking here, of course, the console.log keeps getting executed. But again, the component itself is not re-rendered. Okay, but let's move on here and let's implement this next button here. So here I have these 3 pluses, which means that when I click here, I actually want like a super like. So this should then improve by 3. So let's create a function for that. And I will just copy this one. And let's call it triple ink. And then I'll just duplicate this here. And then let's come down here on click. And then handle triple ink. Okay, let's go back to our function because this will become very important. So what do you think is going to happen when I click here now? Again, let's close. So what do you think will happen to this state here in particular? So let's see. And well, it only increased once. So not 3 times as we might expect. But were we actually really expecting that it would increase 3 times? I mean, with what we already know, we should know that this here could never work. So let's see why that is. So right here at the beginning of this function, likes was 0, right? And so then here, set likes would be 0 plus 1 equals 1, right? So this one is pretty clear. But then what in the next line? So what is the value of likes here in this line? Well, it is actually still 0. And so that's because the state update is once again asynchronous. So we do not get access to the new state value after this line of code right here. And so this is exactly what happens down here. So here the state is now stale. So as we learned in the previous lecture as well. So we can very easily see that here again with this console.log. So if I click again, and actually I want the other one, so this one here, well, then you see that it became 2, which is exactly the value that we had before. And so here it was 2 plus 1 made this new 3. But here it was still 2, and here as well, and here as well. So how could we make this work if we really wanted to update the state 3 times like here? I mean, of course, we could just do this, but this is not the point here. So we are trying to learn how we could do this right here in another way. So actually, we have been doing that all along. So all the time, whenever we were updating state based on the current state, we would use a callback function instead of just a value. So we also talked about that in the previous lecture. And so now the time came where we really learn why we have been doing it with the callback function all the time. So let's remove this here or comment it out. And then let's do it the right way. So set likes, and now we pass in the callback function. And then, as you already know, the first argument here is the current value of the state, and then we just return the new one. And again, here likes could be called anything. Okay, let's do this 3 times. And then let's reload. And now, yeah, now it works. So this is the trick that changes the way the state is updated. So here in the callback function, we do actually get access to the latest updated state. So initially likes was 0, and then it returned 1. And so then in the next call here, this likes in this callback function will be 1. And so then we can update it to another one and to another one. Beautiful. And so this is the reason why I've been telling you that each time that we set state based on the previous state or based on the current state, we should always use a callback function like this here. Now, you might be wondering, like, why should we do that here? I mean, it works perfectly fine, right? And you're right about that. It works perfectly fine, but we never know what other developers might do with our functions, or even what we might do later ourselves. So let's say that at some point we want to change how this function works, and then without thinking about it, we just do this. And so then we go back to this not working as expected. So now we want to increase the likes by 2, but it will still only increase by 1, right? Or another situation, maybe, let's comment this one out. So maybe here we could think that we could just call this function here 3 times. Or maybe some other developer might think that. And so then they would get surprised when they see that this is actually not working, right? And so, again, you should always use the callback function, because then you are always safe for whatever change your code goes through in the future. So with this, it will now work. But of course, we need to write the correct variable name. So yeah, now it does work. So even if you then use the function somewhere else, by doing this, you are safeguarded about, well, any changes that might occur in the future. All right. And now to finish, let's just prove that automatic batching now works in React 18, even outside of event handlers. So here we have this button that should undo, so it should reset our state 2 seconds later. Well, that's easy enough. Let's just create a function called handle undo later. And this function will simply set a timeout, and then after 2 seconds, it will call handle undo. So after 2000 milliseconds. And so what this will do is to schedule this handle undo function to be executed 2 seconds after this function here was called. And so then handle undo is no longer really an event handler function. It's just any function that simply gets called at a later time. So that's just what set timeout does. So let's then wire that up here with the onClick prop. So handle undo later. All right. Let's just then set our state. Let's clean up here. And then I just clicked and let's wait. And indeed, 2 seconds later, our state was updated. And indeed, our component was only rendered once, which is proved here by this single render string. Great. So again, this proves that in React 18, batching happens not only inside event handlers, but also inside a set timeout. And the same is true for promises and other situations. Now, just to really make sure, and you don't have to do this, but I like to play around with this stuff. So what I want to do now is to render this using React 17. So I will comment this one out and comment this one. Okay, and then here we need to also change here from here. And so now this is basically back to being a React 17 application. And that's exactly what it says here in this warning. So until you switch to the new API, your app will behave as if it's running React 17. But right now, that's actually exactly what we want. So now we get some error here, but yeah. So let's do some state updating here. Then I will clean and watch what happens when I click this button now. So let's wait. And now we got 2 re-renders. And so this does actually prove that before React 18, automatic batching was not happening inside a set timeout. So that's really curious. But of course, let's now put it back. All right. So this was just to show you that there really is a difference. So that React 18, well, really changed this. So again, now we should be back to only 1. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and this is actually all I had to show you here. So this was a bit longer than expected, but we did do a lot of stuff here. So after you do a quick recap of everything we just do here, or that we did here actually, then let's go to the next lecture.